the editor, Kirk Baxter. And we have a couple of actors, Tracy Letts, and Jared Harris. Writer and producer, Noah Oppenheim. And director, Kathryn Bigelow. Congratulations to all of you. I'm not sure how well we'll be sleeping tonight. I'll just start with a question for, I'm not sure if it's a question for Kathryn or Noah, but when did this start? How did this start?
How did this start? It started with a kind of what if question. What would happen if an ICBM was launched toward North America? And what are the channels of communication, the halls of power? How would they react? And someone said, well, there's this incredible screenwriter / journalist who is a subject matter expert on that. Why don't you have a conversation? We had a conversation, and
and as a screenwriter, pretty much the best phone call in the world you can get is that Kathryn Bigelow wants to talk to you. And we just started chatting about what a story like this might look like. And one of the things that makes Kathryn such an extraordinary filmmaker is her commitment to authenticity and realism. So our next step was, let's talk to the people in those rooms and find out how would it actually unfold. And that's what we started doing.
Yeah. That's what we did. I want to talk about that research process, but before that, was there something that prompted that what if question for you?
Well, I think we're living in a fairly volatile world environment, and just began thinking about the fact that there's 9 nuclear countries, only 3 are members of NATO. That calculus made me feel somewhat vulnerable, and so I wanted to drill down on it. And I am very excited about or interested in film that can also be informative. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's an opportunity to dig into some of these questions, and this was the result.
Noah, you have experience researching and reporting this in your prior life as a journalist. I'm curious about how you use that, and also, how that was then transformed into the dramatic structure.
Sure. I was fortunate to know a lot of former and current government officials, and so we could get them on the phone, and because of the incredible admiration that members of the national security apparatus have for Kathryn because of the previous movies that she's made, those doors will swing wide open. And so we're able to talk to people who had served at the highest levels of the Pentagon, the White House, the CIA, and ask them these kinds of questions, and they were willing to talk because they have a trust that if it's a Kathryn Bigelow film, it's going to treat them with respect and depict their world with realism.
Did the process of researching and writing change your understanding of the nuclear threat?
It just increased my fear and my anxiety. I think one of the things that stuck with both of us was one of our earliest conversations was with somebody who had served as a chief of staff to a Secretary of Defense, and we asked him, how much training does the Secretary of Defense and the president have for this? Because at the end of the day, as we see in the movie, the president in this country has the sole authority to make a decision about the use of nuclear weapons. It all rests with him. How often does he practice this? And the answer to our question was hardly ever at all. That maybe when the president first takes office, he gets a briefing, here's your military aid, he's gonna follow you around with this briefcase, here's what he would say to you if this should happen, and that's pretty much it. And then they never think about it or practice it ever again. And that's the person who will have a matter of minutes to make this decision.
Yeah. I'd love to hear you talk about the decision to structure the film this way. Maybe Kathryn and Noah, you want to talk a bit about?
Well, it really came from a desire to make it in real time.
Yeah.
And so in real time, you're looking at 18 minutes approximately, which is apparently, if there was a launch somewhere in the Pacific, that would land in North America. So 18 minutes is a very short period of time, and wanting to give the audience an opportunity to really look at those 18 minutes from different perspectives. You know, you have the missile defense at the beginning, then you have the White House Situation Room, which feeds information to the president, and of course Stratcom, and then the president. And so what was interesting was to be able to dig in as deep as possible within those 18 minutes and to really appreciate how short a period of time 18 minutes actually is, and that the fate of the world would be decided in that very short period of time.
Yeah. I'd love to bring in the actors, Jared and Tracy, and hear you talk about working, I guess, creating these characters that exist within this very short period of time. We're obviously preoccupied with, there's a lot going on, but they also do, they come across as human beings. I mean, the rest of their life comes into focus, in partial ways, which seems like an important decision as well on the part of Kathryn and Noah. So I'm curious about how you approached it as actors.
Well, I think that was the tension in the script, which is that there's a scenario which has these preconceived steps that people have to take, but at the same time there's people who are going to be taking these steps, and they're aware of the consequence of it. So there's this tension between the actions that they have to take and the human being that's taking these actions, and that all the way across the story, every single character, you get glimpses into the human animal, if you like, that's being put in this situation. And some of them are sort of more extreme in examples of my character, but every character is forced to face that moment of, am I going to do this, or what is my choice as a person, as a human being, and am I going to just push this along the chain, or am I going to make a choice?
Yeah, I think that was the gig. The gig was you fulfill the job, the procedural aspects of the job. The whole thing is about procedure and systems, but the idea being that as human beings we provide a little humanity to that. It's a reminder. Well, it's a way in for the audience, right? They get to put themselves in the shoes of these characters. And at the same time, it's a reminder that that is the way the system functions. It's not run by computers or AI or a book. It is in fact run by people who are throwing the switches and pushing the buttons. And that has meaning and impact. And it's something we should, if we're gonna consider this system, that's something we should take into consideration.
Sorry, go ahead. Maybe we can bring Kirk in as well, so if we're talking about the structure of the film. Was that fairly worked out already in the screenplay, or I'm wondering, how editing factored into it? Just the use of real time and the sort of overlapping, Rashomon-like perspectives.
The way that Kathryn captured it, we had more ability to overlap than designed, so we could sort of choose where we wanted to go in and out. Like, the script was very buttoned down and you could follow it to a T, but we enjoyed the repetition of hearing things in different places, so we used it more than we thought we would. And because Kathryn was bogarting the script, she was, every time I went to look at it, she had it. And so a lot of the time I didn't quite know when Noah expected us to pivot to a different scene, so we sort of made it up based on the material in front of us. But it became mostly about must-haves. It's exciting, the dynamics of, the speed and the pressure of things, but it's the performance-based, the humanity, the must-haves, the Jared when he's like staring out the window and his cheek is moving, and the muscles on his cheek and nothing else but the muscles on, that's a must-have. And these things, when you've got so many choices, these things are like, that's a pillar in making your building. Every time we watch the movie or played through a scene, I don't think we played it without Kathryn saying at the exact same time, I don't have 1 minute, 1 sec. I think I got it wrong. I don't have 1 sec. So there was lots of must-haves, and they make your life easy as an editor. And it's all performance-based. It's all, you know, the movement is hopefully thrilling and keeps you hanging on to your fingertips if we did it well, but it's the performances in quiet moments that are the point.
And maybe we can bring in both Volker and Paul to talk about your work. There's an incredible amount of tension in the film. I mean, obviously it's the scenario, but there's a lot of interesting formal choices that that create that effect too, and music and sound being very important.
Well, I mean, it's the same, in a way, the same thing I had to deal with. There's a procedural element in the film that is repeated 3 times, and obviously you want to raise the dynamic in each chapter in a way, because you know there's much more pressure each time you see all the elements you remember in the first chapter, and you take the second one in, and in the third chapter, you know in a way the whole scenario, and at the same time it gets more sentimental in a way towards the end, because you suddenly realize that how high the stakes are, what we are losing in a way with these decisions, and that it's also, that there's never a win in a way. And I think that to express that with music is great when you find the right spot for it. If you also have to save the realism of the story in a way, if you overpower it too much. So I tried to find elements that were moving the film forward in a thriller kind of way, but I also used sounds that were more moaning and more that had the quality of, let's say, something is broiling underneath the earth. And I had an element that was creating a little bit more like a religious or a humanity theme. It was in a way, I was always thinking about the music in the church, where I felt like it remembers me always of, being a part of something bigger than, destruction or having the things that others have, something like that. So these 3 elements were mainly the ones, and obviously we had to work together.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess I'll take over from there then. Yeah, no, this movie is a little bit of a different approach for me than maybe generally. A lot of times I work in a big action movie, it's more you paint by the numbers, you're more locked into what you see on the screen. This movie was really, my work came from the pages of Noah and directing and everything that you see on the screen, so it was more like a story-based sound job, and I felt I wanted a lot of chaos in the beginning, even though there's a order to things, there's a lot of things going on. And then as we get to the last chapter in the movie, we're there with the president, it's comes this human story, and I want it to be way less complicated to listen to. So reversed arc almost of it to make it as overwhelming at points till we get to Idris in the end of the helicopter and leaving this incredible decision that I think you're working on movies. I can't believe it's up to one guy that might not be the best guy to actually make that choice. But that was my approach.
I also think, just to jump in, that there's such an interesting dynamic between the music and the sound design, because they're both incredibly integrated. Like, you can't really tell them. I mean, the sound design and the music are sort of live in a very similar space, but one enhances the other, and it's a really extraordinary symbiosis, I think, of the two.
It's a question for you, Kathryn, but I'm curious, everybody else can jump in as well. I mean, there's a sort of, I guess, other films that have dealt with the nuclear threat over the years at very different moments in history. There are also films that I think have they're all, in some ways, I think, invitations to think through this thing that we'd rather not contemplate. But they also take they have very different tones. I mean, Failsafe and Dr. Strangelove and your film, and like The Day After. I mean, they all seem to be really very different. And I'm just wondering how you see this film in that lineage. In some ways, each film really does speak to its moment. And I'm curious if you had those in mind and what kind of tone you wanted to achieve with this one.
I love those movies, but I come from an era where we used to hide under our desks in case of an atomic blast, which of course could do nothing. And it was very confusing to me. What am I doing down here? But nonetheless, I'm here. And then, you see these movies, and I thought they were extraordinary. And then, now looking at the world in which we live and the amount of, there's over 12,000, and that's an accurate count of nuclear warheads in the world. And like I said, there's only 3 countries that are members of NATO. I mean, my hope was this could be, lend some information, but at the same time, encourage a conversation about reducing the nuclear stockpile. I mean, that would be the optimum, I suppose, hope that would come out of this film. It's a conversation, certainly it's a conversation starter, and perhaps a cautionary tale.
Curious about a couple of decisions in the film. Related, I guess, to the ending. Well, I guess actually I'm curious about 2 things and what's left out of the film. Not telling us the source of the missile. I don't know, Kathryn or Noah, you wanted to?
Sure. I think that if we were to identify who launched the missile, it kind of gives us all an easy out, because then there's a clear villain and they're responsible, and then we can kind of go back to our lives. I think we're trying to ask a bigger question, which is to say, is this a global reality that we want to continue living in? Because it could be any one of those 9 countries that does this. It could be a country we don't know about yet that has one of these weapons. Or, as one of the characters in the movie says, it could be a submarine captain who wakes up one morning and finds out his wife left him and decides just to push the button. That's how fragile the system is. And so rather than ascribe blame to one bad guy, we wanted to really interrogate the larger reality.
Mm-hmm. And the decision not to show the blast.
Yeah, in order to kind of start a conversation. Like let the audience have a moment to decide what ending they want. It's in our hands, I think.
I think that's a good note to end on. I want to thank all of you.